So we've been going through Genesis, and a theme that you could find in the book of Genesis all throughout, if you think about the book of Genesis, a theme that you can see all throughout the book is there's this theme of land, this theme of seed, and this theme of promise or blessing or covenant. So land, seed, and blessing. We've seen this through the beginning of the book of Genesis. The promised seed would come in Genesis chapter 3. There's a land that's been promised to Abraham, this promised land. There is a promised seed that is coming their way, that he would be given an heir. And there's blessing and covenant that's being made. And you'll see this all throughout Genesis. And as you look for them in Genesis, you can follow the train of thought. So just a side note as you go through the book of Genesis to look for these themes of land, seed, and blessing. Of course, when I start, my headpiece will come off. So Genesis chapter 12. We were introduced to Abram, right? Remember this journey of faith that he was on. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8 says that by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called out to go to the place that he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. Right? He took these steps of faith. He took this step of obedience. He left Ur, where his father and his family was from. He left that place and headed to this unknown place. This unknown place that God was calling him to go to. Let's look back on the beginning of in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, and we can see a little recap. Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you." Doesn't tell him where, but a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. He's childless. I will bless you, I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. You see it. I will send you to a land that I will show you. Land. I will make you a great nation. Seed. Descendants. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. And you shall be a blessing, and those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. You see this theme of land, seed, and blessing. Now Abram goes out, leaves his father's house, and comes to the land of the Canaanites, the land of Canaan. And you see in let's look at verse 5, then Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother and son and all the possessions that they had and gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were there in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land, the land of Canaan." He had arrived to this place that he was going out in obedience, that he did not know where he was going. He gets to the land, and the Lord said, "This land I will give to your descendants." And he built an altar. Right? It says he called upon the name of the Lord. He built an altar to the Lord who appeared to him, and he worshiped. In verse 8 it says, there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So Abram journeyed and gone on still towards the south. We see he had made it to this place that he was walking by faith, made it to the place that he stepped out in obedience to come to. He made it to this place that God had promised him, given him all these promises, and he was in the land. Look at verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land. Like, what? You told me to come to this place. I followed you. I walked in obedience. I'm here. This is the land that you have promised. And then a famine hits that land that you have promised. This was supposed to be the land. This is what I've been walking in obedience towards. Can you imagine Abram's mindset? I just left my entire family. Like, I left my father's household, everything I knew, everything I was comfortable with. I've come to a land. I've walked by faith. I've obeyed you. I've come here, and then a famine hits. Like, I didn't ask to come here. You sent me here and there's a famine. Like, why not the land of milk and honey? Like, why is it not flowing with riches? You promised me a land, you've given me these promises, and yet a famine hits. And not just like any famine, right? Like verse 10 says it's a severe famine. A severe famine hits the land. So what is Abram's response? Can you imagine the state of mind he's in? Can you put yourself in those shoes? Like, wait, like, why are these bad things happening? Like, I thought I was doing good. Like, I thought I'm walking by faith. I thought I've been obedient. Like, this doesn't make sense. And I think one thing you can definitely take note of, and we heard it last week, on our journey of faith, there will be problems. On our journey of faith, there will be problems. It's easy for us on this side of the book to look at this situation, and as we have the bigger picture of Abram's life and him becoming Abraham and everything that's going to happen to him, it's easy for us on this side to be like, okay, there's a big picture here. There's something that God's working out. We can see it. He's making Abram into Abraham. He's giving him this land. It's going to be a promised land. He's building Abram to be Abraham. Like, we can see the big picture. But for Abram, all he sees is what he sees in front of him. In his moment, he's walked in obedience, and there's a famine. There's trouble. There's problems. We see this big picture, right? As we're reading the scriptures. Like, Abraham is going to become Abraham. He's not just a father of faithfulness. He's going to be the father of the faith. Like, there's obviously a work that is going to be doing in Abram's life. Abram's life is a life of faith that demonstrates genuine faith for all believers. His life is an example of the journey of faith that we're all on. It's pointing to the coming of Christ. His life is an illustration of redemption, the promised seed that's going to come from him, and how it's brought on by God and not by the flesh. This land that he's giving him is going to be a land that God is going to meet with his people and dwell in. God is going to meet with his people in this promised land, and it's supposed to be a picture of the promised land, the true Jerusalem that will come. And we can see this big picture, like, okay, like, obviously the Lord's working. Like, obviously the Lord's got a plan and a big purpose, and therefore we can trust God when things happen. But for Abram, in this moment, it's just a famine, and the boy's hungry. He's hungry, he's walked in obedience, and he's got people with him. He's got a wife who's hungry. He's got his brother's son, Lot, who's with him, who's taken under his wing to raise because his brother died in an early age. Right? He's taking on his brother. He's got his brother's son. He's got servants that are with him. And all he knows is he's hungry. And he's got people that he's hungry and responsible for. What to do? All he sees is the problem. All he sees is the problem. And there are moments on this faith journey where things won't make sense. I mean, you guys, if you've walked any time with the Lord, you know this. I'm preaching to the choir. There is problems, and on our faith journey, things will not make sense as we've walked in obedience. As we've walked by faith, we don't know why things are happening the way that they are. But moments of problems brings moments of opportunities for us to make decisions and choices. We have a decision to make. We have an opportunity, a decision. What will we do? A lot of times in theology, right, we'll talk about the will of God. Like, what is the will of God for me in this moment? Like, I've been walking by faith, Abram's in this moment, and now there's a problem, a situation, a cause for question, a decision that needs to be made. What do we do? There's a famine, and I'm supposed to be in this land. And we wrestle through the will of God. You've heard me all the time. I feel like I hear it all the time. Okay, what does God want to do with my life? What decision do I make? How do I know what is God's will? What is his desire? What is his will for my future? With my spouse, with my job, where should I work? Where should I live? Who should I choose? What should I do in this moment? What house should I buy? Well, right? A lot of times we want God to reveal his will. And a lot of times we have this desire of seeking the will of God. A lot of times what we really want is I want to know the secret will of God. I want to know the crystal ball will of God. I want to be able to see into the future. I want to know how this is going to pan out. I want to know, okay, if I make this decision, will it go well for me? That kind of will of God. Not the providential will of God. I want the secret will. I want the crystal ball. I want to make sure that the decision that I'm making is not going to bring problems. I want to make sure that the decision that I'm making, I can walk in secure confidence in. Lord, tell me what I am supposed to do, and I'll do it, because I know that you've said it, right? I've found it's easier to walk in obedience than faith. It's easier you tell me what to do, I'll do it. But leave it up to me. Leave it up to me trusting you and making a decision. That's scary. Tell me to do something, I'll do it, but the what ifs are endless when it's up to me. When it's based upon trust or faith and me figuring it out, the potential sort of problems that I have to wade through are endless. Just tell me what to do. But faith requires more of an understanding and relationship than just obedience. And what is God after? He's after faith. Faith is dependent upon relationship. Trust is dependent upon relationship. Without faith, it's impossible to please God, we know. God is about producing within us faith. This deepening of a relationship, this authentic, genuine trust in him. So, we're placed into these moments of problems where I have to weigh out the decisions. I have to seek the Lord. I have to walk by faith. I have to trust in what has been revealed to me through his word, through his promises, and walk by faith rather than just do this. So, Abram is faced with a challenge and a problem. What will he do? Continue on in Genesis chapter 12. Go in verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there. For the famine was severe in the land. Now, we look at that, and I think if you've spent any time reading your Bible or in the church, Egypt is not a good picture, right? You're Egypt, sin, right? Egypt is considered slavery to sin. There's so many pictures of what Egypt is. Some commentators will differ on whether this was a good decision by Abram, whether he was supposed to go to Egypt, whether this was a sinful action or a decision, or whether this was an okay decision that he made. It was allowed. It wasn't a bad decision. Some commentators will say it was a breach in his faith. Some will say it was sin for him. Others said, well, at least he didn't go back to where he was from. God told him to leave his family's household. It could have been easier for him to go back to his family's household where it was more convenient. He knew about it. There was more security. At least he didn't go back there. He at least went to Egypt. I don't know. There's no clear indication if this was a sinful action. I think there is some points to be taken and learned from these moments, from this decision that he made. You can look at some observations with me. In Genesis chapter 26, you don't have to turn there, but Isaac also had a famine in the land. Later on in Genesis chapter 26, there was a famine in the land besides the first one, Genesis chapter 26. There's a famine in the land besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land which I should tell you." This didn't happen, at least in the context that we're reading. And in Genesis chapter 12, God didn't come and speak to Abram and say, "You should not go down to Egypt." But it happens here. And he says in verse 3 of Genesis chapter 26, "Dwell in this land. I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I have given this land. And I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father." It is still the same promise that was given to Abram. So you could say God gave the promise to Abram to stay in the land that he had promised. So should he have gone down? I would think not, but at other times, later on in Genesis chapter 20, in Genesis chapter 46, Jacob was called by his sons to go down to Egypt, right? Because Joseph was there. And God had made a way to continue to sustain the line of Jacob through Judah, and it caused provision to happen through Joseph. And it said that God revealed himself to Jacob, to Jacob, and said, "No, you're good. You can go down to Israel. I'm making a way. I'm going to provide for you there." So there's times where God says it's okay. It's not okay at these times. All we can really look at is God gave Abram a promise. God said, "Hey, this is the land I will give you. I'm calling you to this land, and I will make your name great. This is the land of promise I'm going to give to you and your descendants. I'm going to give this land to you and your descendants." In Genesis chapter 26, which seems very similar to this story when the famine hits, it actually says that Isaac did not go down to Egypt as God demanded him not to go. And he said that he sowed the land, he planted and sowed the land, and it said he reaped 100-fold in his sowing. So, is it a possibility that God could have done the miraculous and Abram missed out by going to Egypt? If he would have stayed in the land and trusted that God was going to provide if he called him to go to this place, is it possible that he missed out on seeing the miraculous? Yes, it's possible. It's possible that he could have seen God provide in miraculous ways that built his faith. I lean towards the tendency, myself personally, to think that this was not a faith-filled decision. This was a decision made in need and in fear. He was hungry. He's looking at his situations and decided to take a step and go down to Egypt. He could have trusted the promises of God and waited on him to provide the food. He is able to do that. He reaped a harvest for Isaac out of the ground 100-fold. He brought manna. He brought quail to his people in the wilderness. He brought water out of a rock. Is God able? Yes. But Abram makes a decision to go down to Egypt. One thing I can say for sure in this story is faith will be tested. Your faith will be tested when you're given the promises that God has given you. Your faith will be tested. And Abram's faith was being tested in this moment through a famine. I hate tests. I hate tests. I've hated tests. When I was in school, I never wanted to take a test because I'm very performance minded. I want to do good. The only purpose for a test for me was to get a good grade. I wanted to get a good grade. I wanted to get a good grade so that when I got home and showed my report card, I wouldn't get grounded because I wanted freedom, right? I wanted to get a good grade, so I didn't want to limit the desires that I have. So on the test day, the only reason for the test was to get a good grade. I wasn't in the place or the framework of mind that I'm like, oh, well, the objective of this test is for improvement, right? I'm looking at this test as an opportunity to show me my weaknesses so that I can be strengthened. No, I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to just get a good grade. I didn't want to be grounded again. But tests are needed. And tests show you where you stand. Tests show you the value of something, the genuineness of something, and your faith is so valuable that it's worth testing. Your faith is so valuable that it's worth testing. I remember when I bought the engagement ring for my wife. Like, rings are expensive. Like, I don't understand this whole jewelry thing and diamonds. Like, I remember, like, seeing the price tag. I'm like, oh, this one looks good. And I'm like, okay, not that one, because the price tag was revealed. I'm like, okay, I don't understand. These prices are ridiculous. But you better believe, when I chose the ring that I was going to get for my wife and they showed me the price tag, I'm like, yo, we're testing this ring. I want to see the certificate. I want to get this ring appraised, right? I want you to tell me the genuineness of this diamond. I want to make sure on the certificate it says cut, carat, color, diamond, clarity. I want it all. Like, I want to make sure this thing is tested. If I'm going to dish out this kind of money for this, I want to see it. I want to see the test and I want to see the report, right? Because the money I was dishing out was of value to me, right? So I wanted the test. I wanted to see the genuineness of it because of the value I was giving out. Do you know the value of your faith? Do you know how valuable your faith is? Think about it. The outcome of your faith is salvation. In your faith, there's redemption. Through your faith, an inheritance. Through your faith, the forgiveness of sins and everlasting joy. In the presence of God, a deeper relationship through faith. Do you understand the value of your faith? It's worth testing. God is after genuine, real faith. Therefore, Abram is being tested. His faith is being tested. His trust of God is being tested because God is after genuine, real, authentic, proven faith. 1 Peter chapter 1. I'm going to read it for you, verse 3 through 9. If you want to flip there, you can go ahead and look there. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away. This is yours in faith, reserved in heaven for you, who are being protected by the power of God, you that are in faith. You are being protected by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice. This is your faith. This is what's coming for you. And later on in that passage in verse 9, it says, obtaining as the outcome of your faith, salvation of your souls. Do you see the value of your faith? In the middle of that passage, it says, in this, verse 6, in this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, problems, tests, so that the proof of your faith, other translations say the genuineness of your faith. You've been struck with these trials, these distresses, so that the genuineness, the realness, the proof of your faith being much more precious than gold or an engagement ring. Much more precious than gold, which perishes, even though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. God tests our faith. You want to note this? God tests our faith because he is after genuine faith, not fake faith. A saving faith, a real and right faith that results in praise and honor and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. He isn't some school teacher who delights in a hard test just to see some kids kicking and screaming so he can flunk them. He wants to see you graduate. He wants to see faith and genuine faith built in you. So, what does this test reveal? Well, for one thing, when tested, it reveals impurities. Impurities in our faith. 1 Peter says, our faith is more precious than gold. And how is gold refined? It's tested. It's tested through fire. And we know what happens with gold when it's tested through fire. The impurities or the non-genuine gold, the things that are not gold, will rise to the top as it's heated up by fire so that it can be scraped away or they'll burn off. So all that's left is real, pure, genuine, undefiled gold. And if that's done with gold, which is perishable, and our faith is more valuable than that, and what is God doing with our faith when it's being tested? He's bringing these impurities to the surface. He's making your faith praiseworthy. He's making it real. Something that's going to honor and praise in the last days, that would bring praise. So, Abram is walking this journey, and his faith is being tested, and he decides to go down to Egypt. And I don't know about you, but one thing that I've noticed in my life, when I start walking in the flesh, it's just like a downward spiral. I just feed the flesh in one area. I let my mind wander into a flesh fear-filled thought. And then it's just one thought after the other. Now I'm just sitting in my room contemplating all these imaginary things that are not happening in my life. And I'm afraid about this possibility. I'm like, how did I even get here? Anyone with me? Last night I was sitting in my living room and I was I heard Zion coughing. This is morbid. I'm sorry. Diana's not in the room, so that's good. Morbid. I heard him coughing in the middle of the night. It was late at night. Heard him coughing, then went silent, and I'm like, is he dead? And I'm sorry. That was my mind at that moment. I apologize. I'm real with you guys right now. I got scared, and I was like, what if he's dead? What am I going to say to Diana? I literally spent the next couple of minutes just thinking about what the possibilities of what was going to happen from that moment of fear. I don't know if you are the same way. Abram takes a step. He goes down to Egypt. What happens next for him? And it came to pass when he was close to entering Egypt that he said to Sarai, his wife, "Indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore, it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me. But they will let you live." There's a lot of stuff that just starts happening, right, in Abram right now. He's traveling down, he's made a decision, he's walking in that decision, and all these things are starting to happen. As he's being tested, he's going down to this place, and all these impurities are rising to the surface. Right? The Bible talks about how sin spreads. Right? Flesh-filled decisions. The Bible talks about sin in our life as like leaven. You put a little, right, you know about leaven, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. You just need a little bit of it and it rises the whole thing. And I don't know about you, just one cookie for me. I made a decision to have one cookie. I'm just going to have one. And the next moment, I'm sitting there convincing myself, okay, because I just ate 9 of them, I'm going to, I'll make it up, tomorrow I'm just not going to eat breakfast. And I have to convince myself that this is okay. I'm not going to eat breakfast. I'm going to run a couple extra laps because I had one cookie that turned into 9, and I'm convincing myself that it's okay. Maybe I'm the only one. When we are walking in the flesh rather than in faith, when the soil of our heart has begun to feel or be permeated with, and our mindset has been set on selfish, sinful desires or sinful patterns of thought, when our soil of our heart is like this, flesh-filled, then we can expect to reap a harvest of bad fruit, a harvest of it. And we see this progression. First, he leaves Canaan, the promised land, and goes down to Egypt. Now he's living in the fears of the unknown, the potential possibilities. And he is so confident in them. I know when they see you, they will take you, and they will kill me. They will kill me, but they will let you live. Is this a possibility? Yes. This is not like irrational. Is it a possibility? Yes. Is it reality? No. It's not reality. Research says, and they can't get it right, they are constantly going back and forth, research says that either 85% or 90% of the things we worry about never happen. Michel Montaigne, a French philosopher in the Renaissance era, says, "My life has been filled with terrible misfortune, most of which never happened." I thought that was great. We live in this place of fearful decisions. Has it happened to you? You start to live in the flesh or start to walk in the flesh, and you start to make these fearful decisions in order to alleviate these imaginary possibilities from coming true. You start living in the non-reality, and often we guise these decision-making in our fear-filled mentality by, you know what, this is just planning. This is wise. I'm trying to make a wise decision here. Yet, they're not based upon facts. They're based upon fear. They're not based upon reality. They're based upon my decision of reality and possibilities as I scope out the land. Abram had a lot of confidence in his imaginary reality and what will happen. But God had spoken some realities to him. God had many I will statements. And Abram decided to live in the I wills that he thought. This will happen. God said to him, I will give you this land. I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. He decided to live in the imaginary possibilities rather than in the confidence that he could find in the Word of God, in the promises of God. So, what choices did Abram have to make? What choices do we have to make during our testing? If you want to write this point down, trust his promises, not in your potential perspective to make decisions. Trust in his promises and not in your positional perspective in making decisions. Trust in his promises, not in your positional perspective to make your decisions. Trust what he has said, not in what you're seeing, in your perspective, and in your position. Trust what he has said. Rely on what's sure, not what could be. A lot of times, that is a pit that is easy to fall in. So, based on this reality that Abram has imagined and living in, look at verse 13, the next part. He says, "Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you." Tell him you're my sister. Now, this isn't a lie, right? They have the same daddy, right? So, Sarai is Abram's half-sister, as you guys know. Terah is her father and Abram's father, different mother. So this isn't a lie. This isn't a false statement, but as it's been said before, a half-truth is still a full lie. But we can make excuses for these decisions. We're living in faith. We're living in fear. We're living in the flesh, and we've made these decisions, and what you're seeing is a spiral effect. As he's made these decisions, as he's living in the flesh, as he's thinking in a fleshly manner, you see these decisions that are being made. And I can relate. I can persuade myself in thinking that these decisions that I'm making are okay because this is not completely false. Like, they might kill me, and God said that he's going to make his name great through me, so I need to stay alive. So he makes a decision to lie and bring his wife into it. So it was in verse 14. So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. He was right on that. She's like 60 years old and still like amazing people, which is like, people say, okay, because they lived so old, like this is her mid-30s, even though she's 60. They lived to 120 something, so this could be like her 30s, whatever. She's a beautiful woman. And the Egyptians notice. Abram was right about that. And the Egyptians notice her. Verse 15, the princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house and treated Abram well for her sake. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels given to him. So you see that he's being blessed in this whole situation. But his wife just got taken into Pharaoh's house. Like, oh, that's nice. She gets a nice blessing. She gets a nice house to stay in. And Abram's getting all these blessings. No. She's been taken into his harem. She is now part of his wives, his harem of women that he has. The promised seed was supposed to come through Sarah and Abraham. They're in the wrong land. His wife has been given to a pagan god, to Pharaoh. He's been taken under and could possibly be impregnated by Pharaoh. Now he's taken into that way, and he's being blessed by Pharaoh, not by God. This is not supposed to be happening. Not the right land, not the right blessing. This is not the way to get the seed. Verse 17, but the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with a great plague because of Sarai, Abram's wife. I love this. I don't know about you and all the decisions that we have to make, and as we're walking in this walk of faith, a lot of times when we're walking in faith and things are not going the way that I think they should be going, when I'm confused in situations, or my faith is being tested, or I'm in the midst of problems and I see problems all around, God can feel so distant. But there's a truth here. No matter if Abram was walking in the flesh, made sinful decisions, he's walking in lies currently, he's put his wife out there, just got her taken because of his wife, because of his lie. His wife has been taken by the pagans and brought into his harem. He has put his wife out there for his own sake, and yet God is still near. And I love that, because I know that I'm a fallen, sinful man, and I know that on my course of my walk, when I walk through trials, I can rely on the fact that God is near. When things don't seem like he's near and he's made promises, he said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. That's even when I'm walking in the flesh and God is near. And God intervenes even in Abram's sin, in his lies, and got his wife into a terrible situation. God is near and God intervenes. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. The Lord was right there, and he was going to accomplish his purposes. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here is your wife. Here is your wife. Take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. And it's kind of sad, right? Pharaoh is acting more righteous in this moment than Abram has been. Like, did the possibilities that Abram was fearful of happen? No. Actually, Pharaoh, it's like, this is your wife. You take her. Why would you let this happen? Why would you lie? And in closing, we see God's hand upon the whole situation. We see God's promise, Abram's faith, walk, and journey, and the problems that he encounters, how his faith is being tested. And I want to remind us that God is after genuine faith. There's a plan and a purpose in all this, and he is near and close to us. He is able to intervene and is always there in order to carry about his purposes and plan. And he'll allow our faith to be tested, but even in our fleshly decisions at times, he is still there and near, and is able to work out all things together for the good of those who love him and are called into his purpose. And we see this in the life of Abram. And I want this to be an encouragement to us, that as we make decisions, as we walk by faith, that God is near, and that his testing isn't bad. We wouldn't think like our young self in school, but we would look at the testing of God because he's after genuine faith. A faith that's going to produce or have an outcome of salvation and redemption. It says of Abram's life that he is, right, becoming Abraham, the father of faith. And he said that it says of him that he is and was a friend of God. That he was a friend of God because of his faith in this faith journey. And God was building Abram's faith. And did Abram learn lessons from this as he saw the impurities come to the surface? I have to believe yes. You see his life and the way that his faith goes. He messed up in a very similar situation later on. But he did get to the point where he was able to offer up Isaac, the promised seed. You see a life of faith that's growing. And God is in all the details. So that when we walk through trial and circumstances, we can trust that God's at work and that these tests are that he is building me in real faith so that I could, like Abram, with this faith, be considered a friend of God. So you see these situations that don't make sense, or you're fearful about the unknown, or you're walking this journey of faith and you're in the midst of testing, and you have to make decisions, and you either have an opportunity to walk in the flesh or the Spirit. Rely on the promises that God has given you. Walk by faith and not by fear, and realize that the testing is in order for your joy. That he would make you a friend of God, and God doesn't need us as his friends, but we benefit from the friendship of God. Will we allow him to build genuine faith in us? Will we trust his ways and not our own? We all have the opportunity, whether we find ourselves in a place of testing or on the outside, not really walking in faith with God at all, not walking by faith. We all have the same decision to make. Will we repent and believe? Will we turn from our own ways and walk by faith and realize that there's friendship awaiting us, real joy that's waiting us? Unbeliever and saint alike, there's still deeper still that God desires for us in this joy that is his in walking by faith. Will we learn from the lessons of Abram and be a friend of God? Let's pray. God, I thank you for this reminder. I thank you for writing down and giving us the life of Abram and this journey of becoming Abraham. That we could learn from his decisions and see where we can trip up and where we have been tripped up. Lord, I pray that as we've examined his life and his failures and his fears and his sins and his struggles and the promises you've made and the ultimate plan, that our faith would be encouraged. God, that we would trust you and not what we see. That we would trust your word and your promises and not our own possible perspectives, potential fears. That we would trust you, a sure foundation that we can walk upon. So Lord, would you use Abram's life to build our faith in our decisions that we have and the practical things that we walk and face. Lord, that our faith would be pleasing in your sight. And we look forward to the day that when we stand before you, that our faith would be praised and honored at your revelation because you have built it. And the work in which you start, you will be faithful to complete. But Lord, I pray that you would give us eyes of faith to trust you, to see these testings and to walk closely, to see where we trip up, and to walk more faith-filled. And Lord, that your testing would build our character. And Lord, that we would grow up to be the place where we would welcome it. That we wouldn't walk in fear, but in faith, in trusting you, because you're a good God who desires our best. So Lord, would you have your way in our hearts? I pray this in your name and for your glory. Amen. Love you guys. Thanks.